This is Jason the Kid Knight, and you're listening to the BBYK podcast.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of BBYK. As always, I'm your host, Viet, and joining me is my good friend and fight consultant, Matt Two Stripe Alexander. What's up, Matt?
Annyeong, everyone. Doing well.
Yeah, we have a fun one for you guys today. We're going to talk a little boxing, and then we're going to get right into it with UFC 211, just an incredibly stacked card. But before all of that, we're going to be joined by UFC featherweight Jason "The Knight" Kidd, and we talk a little bit about his upcoming match with Chas Skelly and the importance of the unheralded behind-the-scenes people that help prepare him to get to the octagon. We had to deal with a little bit of technical difficulties earlier, but no problem. We're back, and we are joined by UFC featherweight Jason "The Kid" Knight. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thanks y'all for having me.
Now, Jason, you grew up in Mississippi. You've called yourself a small-town Mississippi kid. What was it like growing up in a small town in Mississippi?
Man, it was a good life. You know, it was a tough life, but you know, it's been a good life so far. You know, my family we ain't never really had much, but you know, we're a good, strong family, and tough life. You know, my big brother was always tough on me, made me tough. He beat me up my whole life, and you know, kind of helped shape me into the person I am today.
As fans, when we think of fighters, we just think the entire time you guys are just preparing for fights, you're training, you're dieting, doing all of that stuff. But that's not always true. What do you like to do? What do you enjoy doing when you're not in a fight camp and not focused on a fight?
Man, I've got 3 kids and a fiance, and whenever I'm not, you know, training for a fight, you know, I'm trying to spend as much family time as I can. And, you know, every now and then I'll go fishing with my brother and, you know, stuff like that. Just, you know, anything I can do to have a little bit of fun. And, you know, it's pretty much a simple life. You know, I like my family time more than anything, though.
We were talking a little bit earlier. You started fighting as an amateur back in 2008. You actually started fighting when you were just 14, which is so young. When did you actually start training in mixed martial arts?
I started, you know, right at 14. I trained for about 6 months before I had my first fight. I had a buddy of mine that, you know, he heard about me getting in fights all the time, you know, street fights and getting in trouble and stuff. And he was about 10 years older than me. He wanted to kind of teach me how to throw straight punches and kind of teach me how to box. So we got out in my backyard and started messing around. And, you know, we did that for 2 or 3 months, and then it slowly progressed into training for him. And then he went out to a nightclub one night, and they were passing out flyers for a place called the Fight Club in Mobile, Alabama. And when he came home from the club that night, or that next day, he brought me that flyer. He's like, "Look, man, I found this place where you might be able to fight. Call them up and see if they'll let you fight." Well, I called him that Monday, and I was like, "Hey, I'm 14 years old. Can I fight?" And the guy tells me, he's like, I don't give a shit if you're 12, you know. As long as your mom will sign for it, you can fight." Well, we drove down there, and we signed up that Monday. I fought that Wednesday night, and I've been, you know, hard at it ever since.
My follow-up question was actually, when did you make the decision to make this a career, to be a fighter, a professional fighter? It sounds like you made it up sort of at the beginning. This is what you wanted to do.
Yeah, man. I fell in love with it from the beginning, and I never knew if I would really go anywhere. At first, you know, I just wanted to get out there and fight and have fun and stay out of trouble at the same time, you know, because even street fighting, I always loved just to fight. It didn't matter who I was fighting or why we were fighting or whatever. Just I love to get out there and compete or see if I could beat the other guy, you know. And about the time I was 17, my coach comes to me, and Alan Belchick, like, "Hey, man, I think you should go pro." I was like, "Man, if you think I'm ready, I'm down. I'll go pro." And he's like, "All right, that sounds good." He's like, "Well, we're gonna have your first pro fight, and this date or whatever, it was a month or so away. And I was like, all right, sounds good. And we started busting our butts and got ready for that first pro fight. And then, that after, a year or so, I could tell that, I was getting better and better and I was winning more and more fights. And I knew that there was a possibility of me making it to the UFC. And then, it went from being a possibility to it was a thing that I had to make happen. In my mind, it was just something that I had to do. I had to push until I finally got there. And it took me a long time, man. It really took a long, long time. But I kept fighting, kept racking up those wins. And next thing you know, I finally got the call.
Well, you have done really well for yourself. I mean, you are still very young. There are some fighters that they make their debut professionally when they're your age, and you've already amassed a 17-2 record. You're currently on a 3-fight winning streak in the UFC. Now, you just mentioned it, Alan Belcher. You train with the guys at Alan Belcher MMA Club. Even though one person fights, it takes an entire team to get that guy to the octagon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the guys that you've been working with and that have helped you get to where you are?
First, I want to say, though, my actual professional record is 20 wins and 2 losses. Sheer Dog, I don't know why, but they haven't messed up. I don't know if it was something to do with the promoters before or whatever. But, yeah, man, it started off with as soon as I joined Alan Belcher's gym, it was Remix MMA back in the day. And, I had James Sharp, which is he's been in my corner for every UFC fight. And unless, God has another plan, he won't ever miss one. James Sharp, and then Aaron Williams, a guy named Tony Roberts, just a bunch of guys that started off in the beginning, and they slowly but surely helped me work my way up to fighting on that professional level. And then since I've made it to the UFC, I have a new jiu-jitsu coach. His name's Mike Sanford, and man, he has completely evolved my ground game, and it gets better every day. And he gets in there and he works his butt off to make sure that I'm ready for each and every fight, and anything that the guys can possibly do to me on the ground, he makes sure that I'm ready for it. He picks their game apart and he has me ready for whatever they might possibly throw at me. James Sharp, like I said before, he's always been in my corner, always been one of my coaches, and he helps me get ready all the way around. Helps me with my stand-up, helps me with my wrestling, helps me with my ground game. He's kind of the more well-rounded party, I should say. He makes sure that all aspects of my game are on point. And then my new striking coach, he's been down here for around a year and a half, something like that. His name is Brandon Davis, and he's an up-and-coming fighter. You'd be looking for his name here before long. He'll be in the next year or two. He's completely evolved my striking since I've made it to the UFC. You see me from fight to fight get better and better standing up, and that's all because of Brandon Davis. And I mean, of course, he's always helped me out and made sure that I become the best fighter I can be.
I mean, just an impressive list of guys, and I think sometimes the fans we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. It's just a lot of people that help prepare you to get you to where you are, and it's awesome to kind of to give those guys some love too.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I barely named a fraction of the people that actually helped me get ready. I mainly named the ones that are coaches, but I mean that barely even starts to name anybody who helps me, because I mean I've got so many other fighters and training partners that help me out. We've got a great group of guys that are in the smaller weight classes, and they're just ideal for me to train with. And there are a bunch of up and coming fighters that that just haven't put together a good enough record to get their big break yet, but there's plenty of guys from my gym that are well on their way.
Well, that's awesome. We can't wait to hear from those guys too. Let's talk about this card you were on, UFC 211. This is an epic card, very just stacked with lots of talent. Probably one of the best cards. Probably will be the best card of the year. Now, as a fighter, I know it's hard to think about anything or concentrate on anything other than your fight. But I mean, do you ever get a chance to just enjoy a card that you're on as a fan, or is it just you're just focused on your fight?
Man, honestly, so far I haven't. Each fight, I go out there and I fight my fight, and I worry about, what's going on with me. And, after, if I get the win or whatever, after the fight's over with, my head's way too clouded to even think. I'm so wrapped up in everything else that's going on with me that I don't really get to be a fan, And I'm waiting until the day that I actually get to go to a UFC event, because, now that I'm fighting, of course, I get to participate in the event, but I've never been able to sit back in the stands and actually watch the fights. And I'm ready to hopefully do that sometime this year.
Oh yeah, it's a fun experience. Are there any fights on this card that you're? I mean, a lot of big fights on this card. Any ones that interest you in particular?
The only one that I'm really worried about, I want to watch Frankie Edgar and Yair Rodriguez, because those are both possible opponents for me, and people that I'm looking forward to hopefully one day getting in there and get my hand raised against.
Yeah, that should be a fun one. Any thoughts on that one? Who do you think is going to take that fight?
I believe Frankie Edgar should take the fight, because he's a master at imposing his will, and Yair's good on the outside. He's good if he can stay on the outside and get off all his crazy techniques. But I don't believe that Frankie Edgar's gonna just let him sit back and impose his will.
Before we go any further, I do want to talk about your last fight real quick. You were just very impressive. A performance of the night victory for you over a big name in Alex Caceres. You submitted him in the second round. You looked calm, collected, but you were also very assertive. Now, Caceres is one of those guys, he can throw some unorthodox techniques at you, and you were not fazed at all. Now, I know that fight was extra meaningful to you because of your father. Your walkout song, "You Should Be Here" by Cole Swindell, that's actually a tribute to your dad. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's the only reason I use that song, man, because every time I hear that song, all I can think about is my dad. It's just crazy that he never got to actually watch me fight in the UFC. He was always one of my biggest fans and always happy to come and watch me fight, but by the time I made it to the UFC, he was I made it right before he died. I had my first UFC fight, and he was in a nursing home and wasn't able to come. But he wound up dying shortly after my first UFC fight, and it's just crazy that he just missed out on all that. And that song was just absolutely the perfect song. And of course, it was an emotional time, but listening to that song and thinking about my dad, there was no way I could lose that night.
After you won, you actually called out Duho Choi, the Superboy. Is there something stylistically about what Superboy does that intrigues you about a potential fight against him?
Yeah, man. He's just a grinder. He's somebody that wants to go out there and fight hard. And no matter what you hit him with, he's going to keep coming. And I believe that if me and him get in there, it's going to be one of those fights that people never forget about. And that's what I got in this sport to do, is go out there and have fun and entertain. And a lot of people they want to pick and poke and not get touched and win the fight without getting banged up or anything. But I'm not that guy. I want to get out there and grit my teeth and bang it out, and I want to receive punches just like I give them. And it really doesn't bother me to get hit as long as I get to hit them back. And I think that Duho Choi is kind of the same way. He wants to get out there and bang it out and see who's the better man. And I believe that we would just set off fireworks, and that's the whole reason I want that fight, so that way I can go out there and fight in one of those fights that I've always dreamed about.
The UFC didn't quite give you Doo Ho Choi. You got Chas Skelly instead, who you'll be fighting this May 13th, who is also coming off an impressive submission victory over Grutzmacher. Now, you talked about your great coaches earlier and how they help you. You've stated in other interviews that these guys, they break down guys to a science. What are some of the things that you've identified as Skelly's strengths, and what have you guys been working on to prepare for him?
Man, he's a good wrestler, pretty much, in a good ground game. But I mean, if anything, if he's better at me anywhere, better than me anywhere, he's going to be better than me at wrestling. On the ground, I'm just as good as he is. Standing up, if I can stop him from taking me down, I'm going to dominate. So I mean, yeah, of course, we've worked a good bit of wrestling to make sure that I'm prepared to stop those takedowns and keep the fight on the feet. If I keep the fight on the feet, then I believe I'm going to dominate, and it's going to be a long-ass night for Chas Skelly.
Now, I know that you are a bit of a trash talker in the gym, and that has started to transfer over into some of your fights. So my question to you is, have you been working on your trash talking game for Chas?
Not really, man. I trash talk every day in the gym. That's just part of it. I get out there and I have fun. If guy hits me hard, and after he hits me, I'll tell him, "Hey, is that all you got, bitch? You can't hit no harder than that," or something like that. And that's just my way of getting through the day. Fun and going out there and really enjoying what I do. And that all kind of falls into the fights every now and then. And it's just mainly, if I get out there and I'm feeling it during the middle of the fight, if I'm in that kind of a mood to, get out there and talk trash, then, it's going to come out of me. And if it happens with Chas Skelly, good. But if it don't, it's no big deal. I go out there and I fight hard. And, my skill is going to make the fans want to watch me just as much as me talking trash,
Is there any extra motivation for you going against a guy like Chas Skelly, or is this guy simply the next guy in your way where you want to go?
Yeah, there's no extra motivation whatsoever. He's just the next man in my way, and I'm extremely motivated for every fight, regardless, because I mean, every fight that I have is the biggest fight of my career. That's the way I look at it. It's not like, oh, this guy's not as good as that guy, or whatever. He's the next person that's in line, and he's the next step that I have to take. I have to get him out of my way to make this happen, or get him out of my way to make that happen, and that's just simply all it is. He's in my way, and I have to get him out of the way. And I believe, if I beat Chas Skelly, I'm either going to have a top 15 opponent, or they're going to give me Doo Ho Choi. And if they don't, then I'm just going to beat the next guy until they do give me Doo Ho Choi. And then, that's my goal right now. My short-term goal is to fight the Korean Superboy.
Wow. That was actually my next question for you. I didn't even want to ask for a name because I know you have a fight in front of you. That's got to be your main focus. But I was going to ask you if you had someone in mind in the event that you beat Chas Skelly on May 13th. It sounds like you're pretty set that you want the Superboy.
Yeah, man, and it's nothing against him. It's actually a compliment to him because he's such an exciting fighter. I love watching him, and like the fight with him and Cub Swanson is really what made me want to fight him. I want to fight Cub Swanson as well, but Cub Swanson's so far up the rankings right now that it's not even really tangible to ask for that. It's a whole lot smarter to ask for Doo Ho Choi because he's closer in the rankings than to me than Cub Swanson is. And they went out there and they banged it out. No matter what happened, no matter how bad one got hurt, he kept coming forward. And that's what I want. I just want to get out there, grit my teeth, and have a hell of a fight, and give the fans something to scream about and give them something to talk about the next day or the next year. Because, like, you go back and you watch the Forrest Griffin-Stephen Bonner fight, and that is a fight that will be talked about for 100 years. You know, people will never forget about that fight. And I mean, Forrest Griffin, he went on to get the belt and everything, but you know, Stephen Bonner, he really didn't have as big of achievements in his career. But nobody's ever going to forget Stephen Bonner's name because of that fight, and that's what kind of fight I want, something like that.
That's actually a really cool perspective in terms of legacy. You want that a signature victory. Most people they feel like it's kind of defined by the belt, but also you're completely correct that Cub Swanson Duho Choi fight was that was one of the best fights that I've ever seen. It was incredible, back and forth. You're right, just two guys gutting it out. Now oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you know, a lot of people, they look at it like the belt's the biggest thing. You know, yeah, of course, the belt's great. You know, you get to say you were the champion. But, you know, in my eyes, it's an even bigger thing to go down as one of the greatest fighters ever, you know, and that's what I want to do. I want to be the next Dan Henderson, or the next, you know, Forrest Griffin, the next Chuck Liddell, whatever. You know, I want to go down as one of the biggest names in the sport. And that's my goal before I leave the UFC. You know, the belt will be a great plus. You know, that's just a big bonus. But my main goal is for my name to go down basically in the UFC Hall of Fame, basically the UFC history books, you know.
Now, Jason, you just recently renegotiated a new contract with the UFC. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, we want to congratulate you on that one. It's well-deserved, my friend. I want to get into the topic of money fights real quick with you. Now, I can just tell you're probably not the biggest fan of the money fights, but it seems like, you know, this is the reality with the new UFC management. We're going to have money fights. How do you feel about, you know, some of these belts? You almost feel like, take the middleweight division, for example, you almost feel like the belt's almost being held hostage a little bit, right? With Michael Bisping. It doesn't seem like he's fought a top 3 guy yet to retain his belt, and then his next title defense will be against a welterweight moving up that hasn't fought in over 3 years. I mean, what are your thoughts on something like that?
It's just, you know, I mean, it's crazy to me. It's like you got these guys who they have worked their ass off to get to you know, their spot in the rankings. They've worked their ass off to move their way up, and they don't get their shot. You know, I think that the way it should be is, you know, number 1 should fight number 2, and then if he loses, number 3 should fight number 1. You know, stuff like that. That's the way it should work. You should fall in rankings how you're supposed to, and I mean, it doesn't have to be 100% to the T, but give the guys who have earned their shot. You know, the guys who have worked their ass off to get to where they're at, give them what they deserve. And, you know, of course, GSP, yeah, he was one of the greatest, you know, in the 170. He's one of those guys that I talk about that I want to be like. But at the same time, you know, GSP's been out for years. Don't just let him jump right back in here and be at the top of the, you know, the top of the list. Let him jump back in here and earn his way back in, you know, just as if a guy who, you know, had his UFC debut, you know, treat him like it's his UFC debut. I mean, of course, you don't have to put him all the way at the back of the rankings, but, you know, make him at least earn his shot at the title defense. I mean, at the title.
I know as a fighter, it must be frustrating to see guys that are seemingly deserving get skipped over for title shots. But just from a business perspective, do you think that the money fight makes sense? These big tentpole events, are they good in terms of bringing in fans, or do you think that eventually that's actually a bad business model? It should be the old way where it was just the competitive business model where the best always fight the best.
You know, I mean, of course, it's always something smart. You know, that's like, you know, you got Conor McGregor with the trash talking. It makes everybody want to watch Conor McGregor. Whether you're wanting to watch him win or you're wanting to watch him lose, you're wanting to watch Conor McGregor, you know, and that makes money, you know. And then you got GSP, one of the biggest names in the sport. You throw him in here and give him, oh, that's going to sell a whole bunch of seats because everybody wants to see GSP hold that belt again. And nobody really likes Michael Bisping, not anybody that I know anyways. Everybody wants to see Michael Bisping get his ass kicked, and they think GSP's the man that can do it. So, yeah, of course, that's going to sell a whole lot of tickets. So, from a business standpoint, I could see where it makes sense. But, you know, from being on the inside, you know, it kind of sucks for us fighters because, you know, it just feels like some people are getting cheated out of what they deserve. And the only reason I say that, you know, it has nothing to do with me by no means. You know, I'm not getting cheated out of anything. I'm working my way up, and I believe, you know, they're putting me in place as I should be. You know, I'm fighting fights that are, you know, very legible and very, you know, accurate. But, you know, some of these guys, I feel for them, in other words, and I hope to God that one day it's not me that's missing out on that title shot because such and such ran his mouth more than I did, even though, you know, he's not as deserving as I am.
Well, that's how the UFC is selling its product right now. I'm going to let you sell yourself a little bit. Why should the fans tune in this Saturday to watch you fight Chas Skelly?
For one, you know, I'm real. You know, I'm not going to go out there and try and do anything that is not Jason Knight. I'm going to be me 100%, and I'm going to grit my teeth. I'm going to fight my ass off. I'm going to pour my heart out on that line every single time, and I promise you I'm putting in the work in the gym to make sure that I'm in shape and that I can go out there and perform the way that I should. I have no injuries, and I'm ready to go out here and give this guy pure hell. And I promise you, from the time the bell rings to the time the bell rings again, I will never stop pushing forward. I will never stop busting my ass to make sure that I get my hand raised. And, you know, even if I don't get my hand raised, I promise you I will not disappoint a single person that's come there to watch me or that's tuned in on TV to watch me. I can promise you from the bottom of my heart, I will go out there and I will not disappoint.
Well, you guys, you heard it from the man himself. You will want to tune in to this incredibly stacked event, UFC 211 at American Airlines Arena in Dallas, Texas, live on pay-per-view. Jason, even though you've already had quite a bit of success at your age, you are a talented up-and-coming fighter. I know the fans love your authenticity and the passion that you bring to the sport. We wish you all the best this coming Saturday, my friend, and thank you so much for stopping by and doing this with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a few seconds, you know, to thank my coaches and a few other people.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you from everybody at Allen Belcher MMA Club so much. You know, my coaches, my training partners, thank y'all so much for working with me and helping me get ready for this fight and every other fight. Also, for all the fights to come, you know. My friends, my family, and my fans, you know, the ones that's been with me for forever and the ones that are just now getting to know who Jason Knight is. Thank y'all for screaming my name. Also, Mr. Glenn Matina with Atlas Fights. You helped me, you know, build my way up to the UFC. You gave me the fights to kind of slowly but surely work my way up, and I appreciate that so much. And, everybody who sponsored me for this fight, thank y'all so much. And thank you for having me on the show.
We want to thank you, Jason, once again for coming on our show, and we wish him all the best in this upcoming fight against Chas Skelly. Now, before we get into UFC 211, we should make note of a fairly significant boxing event that just happened last weekend. We had Canelo Alvarez just completely destroy Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in their fight, but it's hilarious on almost on the brink of being disrespectful. And I guess like you kind of knew going in Canelo was a heavy favorite, but the fact that they had a trailer prepared for him versus Golovkin and they showed it right after the fight, and they also had a press conference prepared. I mean, that's so disrespectful. It's like we got all this stuff ready because we knew you were gonna lose. So I thought that was pretty funny, but I guess like from Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.'s point of view, it's you know, it looked like he just showed up and collected a check. He really did not seem like he wanted to engage too much, play defense, and really didn't do anything. It was it was completely one-sided. So now we have the matchup that boxing fans, fight fans in general, have been calling for a while. Golovkin versus Canelo, which should be great. They're fighting sometime in September. I forget the exact date. And I was just talking with Matt before the show, and he pointed out that Dana White was saying that was the date that they wanted to do the potential Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather fight. So I guess they lost their date. But this should take a little bit of the shine off of Mayweather Conor, at least for a little bit. And also you kind of wonder, you wonder if it killed the momentum. So you wonder if they might push it off until the spring. And by that time, it's like Conor would have taken, over a year and a half off? Yeah. So that's kind of crazy. What are your thoughts, man? Do you still think this Conor Mayweather fight's going to happen?
Let me shake the magic 8-ball. Yes, maybe. Ask again later. I don't know. Ask again later. Depends on what's going to get Conor the most money for the least amount of effort.
Yeah, that's about right. He's going to make a ton of money if he fights Floyd. He'll just make an incredible amount of money. It's still, money-wise, you're talking about money fights, and every Mayweather fight is a money fight. Well, that's to say, his nickname is Money, not to say that he takes only money fights. It's he set himself well. If he gets that Mayweather fight, he set himself well. We got we're gonna be talking about UFC 211 a little bit. We got a couple guys that will be in limbo as long as Conor is still waiting on Floyd. So we'll see how all of that stuff shakes out. Let's get right into it. UFC 211. This is an incredible card. Even on the undercard, we got a couple really intriguing matches. We got Race versus Vic. I'm really excited about that one. We just talked with Jason Knight, his fight against Chas Skelly. That promises to be a very exciting fight. At the end of the undercard, you got Alvarez Poirier, which we were talking before the show. That could be like a main event for one of those fight night cards.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be good. Also, they both recently had their souls taken by different people, although they both have had their souls taken by Conor. But most recently, they both lost in pretty lopsided fashion. Eddie lost to McGregor, and then Poirier lost to Michael Johnson a couple months ago. So it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back psychologically.
I'm very interested for Eddie Alvarez, who has really looked so good since he's come over to the UFC. And he's gotten in some knockdown, drag-out fights before, but he has not been a part of a lopsided beating like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how he recovers from it. But, I've always been I'm a fan of both of these fighters, actually. Would be cool to see Eddie come back and put on a good show. Who are you feeling in this one?
I'm feeling Eddie by decision. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, though. I feel like they're going to both be a little more tentative, maybe, after their recent losses, particularly Poirier. Although I think that's what caused him to get caught in the Michael Johnson fight was being tentative. That's another thing. It would have been a good 5-round fight to see the build-up, but I think it'll pick up pace and be a pretty good fight, if not a great one. And lots of boxing. And probably Eddie is going to take it due to volume of striking.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think you got to look for Eddie to probably mix in some takedowns. Mm-hmm. Especially since his corner was so on him. He didn't. I guess he didn't commit to their game plan. I actually expect Eddie to come out a little aggressive in this one. Sort of try to show that last fight wasn't him. Conor does that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You get in there and you're just, whoa, he's a special fighter, and he's making fighters fight a different way. The only guy that I've seen that hasn't really been rattled by him was Nate Diaz, and then Now, second fight, Nate had his moments too, but it was like, you give Conor a chance to really study his opponent, and he really went at Nate, was put on a really, really great performance. Probably one of his more impressive victories, because it was one of the times when you saw Conor have to battle, through adversity, not just these lopsided victories you're used to seeing him have. And then he went against Eddie Alvarez, and I thought that was going to be a good fight. I thought Eddie Alvarez was really tough. He had just come off a very impressive victory against RDA to win the belt. So and then he went out there and Conor Conor just made him seem like they were not on the same level. It wasn't even close. So I think I'm with you. I see Eddie by decision, and I see him trying to make a statement. And I don't know if Dustin's the kind of guy that could really capitalize on that. I think you're right. More often you see tentative Dustin, not patient Dustin. He's got to make that switch. If he's going to have those slower starts, it's to size up his opponents and pick his shots. And he's also one of those fighters that's really good when he mixes things up and is aggressive too. So it potentially could be a very good fight. Actually, I'm going to change that. I think I'm going to call Alvarez. I think he's gonna finish him. All right, let's get to the main card. The first fight, we had Pettis and Cejudo bumped, unfortunately, due to an injury to Cejudo. I thought that was a very interesting fight for both fighters, and a necessary fight for both fighters. For Pettis, this would have been the biggest name he's had to date. Would have looked really good on his fight resume to get one over Cejudo. And for Cejudo, he's had a couple tough losses now, but they're both against high-level guys. One of them was to the guy that you might say is the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. Had a really hard-fought, close fight against Benavidez. So, really tough that's off the card. Replacing it was already a replacement fight on the card anyways. Now it gets elevated to main card status. You got Krzysztof Jotko of Poland versus David Branch. If David Branch's name sounds familiar, that's because he used to fight in the UFC like 6 years ago.
Oh, for the UFC, but he's been owning everybody in World Series of Fighting. I think that was... Yeah, he signed a big... It might have been something with a contract, like he was going to get money, but this was like many years ago when he switched over. But he's back, and he had like 5 or 6 wins, if I'm recalling this correctly. Hopefully I'm not just making that up. Yeah, he's been on a pretty good run. Both guys actually, like Krzysztof is also Krzysztof fought a lot of guys. He's only got like 1 loss, but he has beaten like a ton of like lower level middleweight guys. Some of them aren't fighting anymore, and most of it's by decision. So it's kind of hard to judge where he's at. And for Dave Branch, this being his first fight back in the UFC, it's tough to see like where he's at competition wise. Like, yeah, he's beaten up on these guys World Series fighting, but is he that good? Who knows? And I'm not even sure if this fight will tell us that. But do have to give him some love because he's fighting for Renzo Gracie. So I'm picking Dave Branch by decision, but it's kind of a question mark to see who's who.
Yeah, I mean, Jotko is ranked number 9. I don't know if anyone was pining for a David Branch comeback story. So, but he could prove me wrong. He can have a statement victory over Jotko and be the next hottest thing. And you know what? There's a lot of fighters that are champions now that are on the wrong side of 30. So you take care of your body right, or in some cases take TRT, and you can be competitive. I mean, Hendo was fighting way into his 40s, so
he's immortal.
Immortal.
Not like Matt Brown.
Yeah. All right, the next fight. I'm actually really excited about this one. To me, probably my favorite fight on the card. You got Frankie Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez. Yair, he's like a video game fighter. It's like if you played UFC and you had unlimited stamina and you could just keep spamming like the special moves.
Spinning shit, go!
Yeah, that's what Yair does, and it's that Taekwondo background that he has, and it's very interesting that he sort of adheres to it in such a technical way. If you watch his fights, there's a lot of that. He's an in and out fighter. So is Frankie Edgar, but in a very different way. And Yair, he switches his stances a lot. He's gotten better about being able to throw off both sides, but to me, it looks like he's fairly right side dominant. So that switching of stance actually serves him really well because it sells the illusion that he can attack from the left side with equal grace and depth. And his style is like I said, it really adheres to those Taekwondo principles. So you're gonna see stuff in that sort of long range, sweeping range fighting where he can get those rounded shots and really get those kicks, throws them in a way that it's just like a video game. It's so fast. It's almost like it's hard to tell often when Yair's fighting. I will say in his BJ Penn fight, it looked like it was a much more controlled Yair. He wasn't throwing as many crazy spinning stuff. I mean, he still did. After a while, it just looked like BJ Penn was in quicksand, and he was able to just tee off anything he wanted to. But he seemed a little bit more disciplined than we've seen him in some previous fights. But sometimes when he is throwing those spinning kicks, you kind of wonder if they're if it's a little bit flash over substance. How effective are these things? He's able to get away with it because he's so athletic. He's so fast. But against a guy like Frankie, and you make a mistake, Frankie's too good, and you could fight a great fight against Frankie and still lose. If you fight a fight where you're sloppy or you start throwing some flashy stuff and get caught, Frankie can take advantage of that. So let's get right into it, Matt. What are your thoughts on this fight? Like, who do you think's gonna take it?
I think Frankie's gonna take it, probably by decision. I feel like there's going to be some opportunities for him to get takedowns and grind it out and ground and pound. And I think we might see Yair a little more tired than we've ever seen him because of that. And there's always the chance, when guys get older in their career, Frankie's been in the octagon more than anyone, spent more time there than anybody else. I think that was like the stat they put up during his Aldo fight. It was like while it was happening, it was like, whoa, he spent over 6 hours fighting in his career so far. And at some point, his chin is going to give, but people have been saying that like since he fought Gray Maynard. You're like, oh yeah, he's definitely going to go out now. He just keeps coming, and his boxing is real crisp, and he's super disciplined. So I think anytime Yair tries anything flashy or makes a mistake, he's going to capitalize on it. Even if he doesn't finish him, he's going to capitalize on it and win rounds that way. So I see it as basically Yair's going to have to finish him in order to win the fight. So Frankie takes it with experience and a little wrestling.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. And that one of the things that I'm worried about for Yair is the way his in and out style. And this happens with a lot of fighters that they come from traditional martial arts background and they try to take that and implement it into mixed martial arts. And then you have these fighters like a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, like a Yair Rodriguez with their in and out style. They tend to get a little lazy with their hands to keep it down on the way back out. And Frankie's just so good. He's constantly circling his opponents. His footwork is really just phenomenal. We talk about other sports, you talk about like savvy veterans, guys that are just really smart, that you can just kind of say, just based on experience and stuff like this, he's just going to have such an edge in the fight on that alone. Frankie is that guy in mixed martial arts. He's, like you said, he's been in so many fights, and he's not going to make mistakes. I could see him capitalizing if Yair's going to go play that in-and-out game and keeps his hands down. I could really see Frankie making him pay. I'm going to go with Yair here, and it's going to be there's nothing against Frankie Edgar. I just think Edgar is slowing down. He's had, that experience in fighting. It comes at a cost, and that cost is that you have to sacrifice your body. And it's not just the fights. It's not just the amount of time he's been in the ring fighting professionally. It's the amount of time he's had to spend in fight camps, sparring. All of that takes a toll on you. How many fight camps he's been in at this point? Yair is young. And when you have young guys that kind of have success like that, sometimes they kind of hit someone like a Frankie Edgar, and they have their humbling moment. And that could definitely happen. Frankie Edgar is very good. I think he's the third ranked guy in the division right now. And so he's still definitely in that title shot contention mix. And obviously an impressive victory over a Yair Rodriguez would put him back up in contention. I think the same thing for Yair, though. I think he beats Edgar, and he's all of a sudden up there as one of the guys you're talking about as a guy that deserves a title shot. To me, Yair's going to have the speed advantage, and that's something that Frankie usually brings to the table. And I think sometimes with those young guys, you also have to you can't oversell how much people can improve at a young age once they get put into proper fighting camps.
Yeah.
And now that he started being part of these more professional fight camps, you saw that in that BJ Penn fight, a more disciplined Yair. He's definitely worked on his striking. His boxing has gotten better. It's not going to be on Edgar's level, but he needed something. He needed his hands to be able to complement what he's able to do in terms of his kicks, because, I mean, we've seen that, and like we said, video game. But against a guy like Frankie, you can't just bring in the flashy kicks. Frankie he plays an in-and-out style too, and he's going to want to get into that clinch range and really get in those short shots and just bully Yair a little bit. And Yair's going to want to stay from distance, because not only is he going to have the reach advantage, so if they play that boxing game, he can kind of stay in a safe range, but that's when he gets to throw those circular kicks. Those are some of his most devastating weapons, so he's going to want to keep it at distance. I think Yair is going to be, because he has the speed advantage, Frankie's going to have a harder time dictating this. He's going to have to constantly move forward and get into that range, and I think Yair can counter that. And man, some of his shots that he can put together. Frankie's not going to look like BJ Penn, but man, there are very few people that can take shots like that. And I think this is going to be one of those fights. I think this is going to be Yair's coming out party. I really do. And I think for Edgar, this could be one of those fights where maybe we start seeing this guy slip a bit. He's up there in age. He's had plenty of wear and tear. Just like I said, that's the price that he had to pay for that fight experience. So I see him losing this one. I think it's going to go to distance. Yair's just going to be able to put in enough damage and win the first few rounds. Frankie, maybe he's able to come back in the late round and get one, but I see this one going to Yair by decision.
Cool.
Now our next fight. One of your favorite fighters, Demian Maia, just a pure jiu-jitsu wizard, 2-time Brazilian jiu-jitsu world champion. Just watch his fights. Once this thing gets to the mat, it's really tough for his opponents. Versus Jorge Masvidal, undefeated on the streets.
Go yeah!
This guy's a beast, and he's kind of making a comeback. That was a statement victory over Cerrone. And I always thought Masvidal, for a while there, he came in strong to the UFC, and then it was like he got a bunch of losses. I always felt like those losses were all to like quality guys. They were all to really good guys. Close. And they were close fights. And it almost looked like it wasn't like dropping into obscurity, but we were not talking about him like he was like a top 10 guy. I think after that fight with Cerrone, people were kind of like, "Oh man, Masvidal's got some skills." How do you feel about Masvidal's chances in this one going against Demian Maia? We should paint the picture that this is kind of a cool move on Maia's part, just to kind of stay active. Now, we've seen this already bite another jiu-jitsu whiz in the ass with Jacare, who took on a fight when he could have maybe held out and waited for a title fight, fought a guy that was Also, kind of like Jorge, where he had like a couple impressive victories, wasn't talked about as a top 10 guy in Whittaker, and is now trying to make a name for himself going against Jacare. Went in there, smoked Jacare. That really bit Jacare in the ass.
Yeah.
So this is a huge risk for Maia because even though we know Masvidal's good, I don't think he's had enough key victories to kind of put himself high enough in the standing where Maia really moves the needle for himself. And Maia's already at the top of the division. He's already being talked about as a
next title contender. Yeah.
So this is a risky fight for him. So that's you got to give props to guys like that, but also I don't know how much props. They also get paid to do this, so they. But
not as much as a main event and winning the championship does.
Let's just get into this. Well, who do you like in this fight, man?
I got Maia because he's smart and he's already been through his like boxing phase where he was like, "Oh, I learned kickboxing and other stuff. I'm gonna stand with people," and then he doesn't win. So he was like, "No, screw that. I'm just gonna do what I do best. Go back to pure jiu-jitsu and make sure I don't get hit." And it is a similar matchup as Jacare Whittaker because Masvidal is also, a very potent striker and very good takedown defense. But Maia is not as willing as Jacare to stand with the guys, and he doesn't really worry about his takedowns too much because he doesn't mind ending up like on bottom of half guard or deep half guard because he's just so good that he can control what people do on top of him. So he doesn't mind as long as he gets to the ground, giving up a little bit better position to somebody.
Definitely is okay with playing the baiting game.
Yeah,
right. We saw that against Matt Brown, where he kind of made it look like a shot wobbled him a bit when he was going in for the takedown. Yeah. And as soon as Matt Brown pursued it, it was like, oh, you just went into his world. And there's not too many people that are willing to give up a bad position like that. But when you're such a whiz and you think that you're just going to be able to dominate your opponents once he gets into his world on the ground, on the mat, that he's willing to do that.
Yeah, and somebody like Matt Brown is pretty good on the ground himself, and he did all the right things. It's just there's really no defense against somebody that's that so far ahead of everybody in his specialty, which Maia he's the man. I'm not going to say, it's not possible for Masvidal to win because he could definitely knock him out or, grind out a messy decision victory. But Maia is pretty smart at this stage of his career, even though he's damn near 40 years old. He's still got it. He's got great technique, so he might not be the most athletic or quickest or strongest guy, but he's got it. Represent.
Yeah, I like Maia. Another thing about Maia, you kind of already talked about this, just how good his clinch game is too. It's not just like once he gets to the ground; he's good through the entire setup. He's very strong for that weight class.
Oh yeah, because he used to be a middleweight.
Yeah, he used to be a middleweight. Now, here's the thing: he's going to be giving up the speed advantage to Jorge. He gives the speed advantage to basically every other fighter on the roster. If you've seen Maia fight, I don't think no one's putting quickness as one of his characteristics as he's like walking out towards the cage. Very quick. He's very crafty. He's like a veteran, kind of like Frankie Edgar. But so is Masvidal. Masvidal's been in the game for a while, even though he's only 32. He's got a 32-11 record. So
a lot of street fights too.
A lot of street fights. They don't count on his professional record, but yeah.
I watched those. I was like, man, that guy has some really good technique, and he's beating up on all these other people. Who is? Oh, yeah, he's a professional fighter now.
For as good as Maia's jiu-jitsu is, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, how you don't have to be as good defensively in jiu-jitsu as you have to be offensively to just stop a submission. It's much easier to kind of play defensive jiu-jitsu And Masvidal's jiu-jitsu is solid. Defensively, he's really good. He has a very high takedown defense rate, and once he's down there, he's very active. So I don't think he's a veteran too. I don't think he's gonna get rattled. I think some fighters get rattled when Maia kind of takes them down there. In terms of the fighters that Maia has fought lately, you take out Gunnar Nelson, who's also a whiz on the ground. He hasn't fought against guys that were too comfortable if it went down to that position. Obviously, Matt Brown is competent, but he's not nearly as good as Maia is. I think Jorge can learn a lot from that Matt Brown fight. And I think Masvidal, his combinations of strikes, he has the ability to keep this fight standing and to pick Maia apart. So I could see Maia having to get desperate to get in close to really take this to the ground, and expend a lot of energy doing that. And I think Jorge's defensive grappling, he doesn't need to really engage, just make sure the guy doesn't secure a takedown, and if he does, it's all about being active, trying to get back up. But I think he has the speed and the striking to keep this fight standing that at some point Maia will probably take him down. He is able to capitalize on people's mistakes and control them, but he also fades in later rounds. And Masvidal is one of those guys where it seems like he gets amped up in a later round. So
yeah.
I think I'm going to go with Masvidal here, just in terms of he's got the speed advantage. I think Maia's greatest strength, obviously, is his ground game. I don't know if that's going to be as great of an advantage against Masvidal against the other fighters. Not to say that Maia isn't a lot better than Masvidal. That's just to say that when your defensive jiu-jitsu and wrestling game and takedown defense is solid, it takes a lot more from the other guy to be able to really impose himself and finish. And I just think Masvidal has the footwork and the striking to be able to keep this standing up, and he's going to really win in those exchanges. Maia's really going to have to eat some shots to get this fight where he wants it. And Masvidal has knockout power, so he's gonna be taking some brutal shots. I think I see Masvidal finishing this fight. This is I think we're gonna see another kind of Whittaker moment where it's like, dang, you shouldn't fight these hungry guys. This is a bad matchup. Not very much for Maia to gain, a lot for him to lose, just like Jacare. And I'm gonna go Masvidal here, but I do like Maia, and you feel for the guys too that seemingly get passed over on title shots over and over again, and then they're willing to take a risky fight like Jacare, and then it's like, all right, back in the line for you.
Should have been a striker.
Oh, our next fight. Oh, this is going to be a good one. We got to talk about Joanna Champion versus Jessica Andrade. What more do we need to say about Joanna? You know, we've seen her fight all comers. She's a very active champion. She's not one of those champions that, like some other champions, we won't name them, that take forever. She's a very active champion, and she's fighting the top fighters in her division. You know, she's not chasing those money fights. And the thing that really impresses me is she keeps on adding things to her game. You listen to the way in her interviews, you listen to the way she talks and breaks down her game. She's very intelligent. She's very smart, and it's really crazy because the amount of offense that she is able to just violent amount of output, and yet you listen to her and it's being very conservative. She's very mindful of like what other fighters can capitalize on, and that's just really, I think, what separates the people that are truly great, people that are already so good, and yet they're always still focused on what they can improve on. She's really special fighter. Across from her, Jessica Andrade, if you looked at her, at least from the back, she's gonna look a lot like Claudia Gadelha. She's just swole. This girl is huge.
Yoked.
She's not particularly tall. She's gonna give up quite a bit of height, and she's gonna give up quite a bit of reach. In this fight, it's very surprising. She actually used to fight at bantamweight. Just a real beast, a real beast of a girl. Two very completely different fighters. You got one person that's a little bit more violent aggression in the form of blitzes. I've heard Jessica Andrade compared to John Lineker a lot, and it's a very on many ways in many ways it makes a lot of sense because both people a little bit shorter for their weight classes, but were actually at a heavier weight class, moving down, and then they just look so much faster at their new weight class, and yet they still keep their knockout power. Very scary strikers, and they fight in these blitzes. Just she throws technique out the window a bit and kind of winds up. It looks a lot like Cody. Now, not Cody in his last fight against Dominic, who we saw a much more composed, disciplined Cody that just looked so impressive. But sort of a couple fights ago, Cody Garbrandt, who kind of would swing a little bit when he got into those exchanges. And then, guys like that, or people like Jessica Andrade, they can get away with that just because of their athleticism and speed. Joanna's gonna, everyone wants to blitz her. Kovacevic wanted to blitz her. It's tough. You go in there, and Joanna could just pick people apart. She's got a great jab. She started throwing kicks. That's another thing. She actually didn't used to throw in kicks because she was afraid that her opponents would be able to capitalize on it and take her down, even though she has shown incredible balance and great takedown defense. So it's just another thing, just another reason why I think she's so great is because she looks at things that aren't even like a big weakness, but she is not ready to put that into her game until she has perfected the techniques and the defense around it to make sure she can use it effectively. It's really special. What are your thoughts on this fight, Matt? Who do you think is going to take it?
I think Joanna's going to take it. She might get a few scares from Andrade. Andrade has got some crazy power especially up close. She's got some nasty clinch moves, but I don't think her wrestling is quite as good as Gadelia's by any stretch. So I think Joanna's probably going to strike from the outside for a while to try to wear her down. Probably we'll see more kicks from her than usual, and she'll have to weather the storm a couple times, but I see Joanna doing her thing, really getting rolling towards the later rounds and amping up the volume and, landing 500 or 600 strikes.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is for Joanna to be able to dictate the distance. Obviously, being the taller, longer fighter behooves her to stay at distance anyway. She usually has that advantage over most of the fighters, and she's already an incredible striker. She's able to keep the opponents at the end of her jabs. She's really good at that. What else is she going to have to do to make sure she keeps Andrade outside of that clinch range where Andrade wants to take it?
Well, her working around the cage and not getting backed up, which she's pretty fantastic at anyway. She's got a good push kick, so that should help. And escaping like that initial grasp and the short shots, which she has some good slips and head movement. So I actually see her being able to disengage and reset pretty well, because people have not normally done that well against Andrade trying to do that. They usually get swarmed, but I feel like her height and reach advantage is going to give her enough time to set up those slips and the footwork stepping out of it. She might be moving around the cage more than usual, and I kind of see Andrade having to chase her for most of the fight, but I also see that working to her advantage. It's probably one of those things where somebody new would see it and be like, how's she winning this fight? She's running away, but she's going to be, picking her shots as she goes, and she's not going to be getting hit. So at least for the first few rounds, she might be played a little more defensively.
For sure, and I think it's those first few rounds that will really dictate the fight. I find the clinch to be very compelling in this fight because both women have had a lot of success in the clinch. Joanna's just really good at being able to manipulate her head, and even though she's taller, she can get it underneath, and her underhook game is very solid. And she also has a very solid single leg takedown, which she can feint or actually throw against other fighters. So there's a lot of things that she can do in the clinch. She's really good off the break. She does a good job of framing with her forearm and really getting short shots in. There's very few holes in Joanna's game. I will say we have seen swarming may be the one thing that any fighter has been able to do against Joanna. And even then, it doesn't seem like there's consistent success. We've seen Claudia do it, and she was able to get up against the cage. But Claudia uses a lot of trips. That's how she gets those takedowns. And Joanna's just very well equipped. She has great balance, and that's a tough game to play against her. Andrade, on the other hand, she goes for those more body locks and single legs, and you'll see her. She gets down. It's kind of like Cormier. So the way that these other fighters, they're kind of defending against those trips and stuff like that by using their balance. Someone with like the core strength and the explosiveness of someone like a Jessica Andrade, they're just lifting up the other opponent. And we've seen her do that to a couple fighters, where she'll just pick them up and just smash them like a rag doll. And once she's on top, I also think that her skills she's better equipped to have success on top than, say, a Claudia, who's more of a grappler, is trying to win positions and set up a submission. Because, like I said before, your defense, your offense has to be so much better than the other person's defense to be able to, unless they make mistakes or you can get in strikes to wear them down. But just as a rule of thumb, if it's just straight jiu-jitsu, if it's even defense versus even offense, the defense should be able to most of the time, be able to thwart submission attempts. Now, Andrade, she does have submissions, but it's not usually the on the ground variety. Her guillotine game is slick. That's another thing that I think presents a challenge for Joanna because of her single legs being her go-to takedowns. Not going to be able to feint that as much, and when it happens, she's putting herself at risk because that plays right in Andrade's hands. Her guillotine is really good. We saw her lock that in on Calderwood, and she's really good at the technique. But once she's on top, it's all about smash and passing. She's really good at throwing short shots, just staying active when she's on top, and I think that's really key against Joanna. You're not gonna. She's really smart. Her jiu-jitsu is really good herself, and she's looking for opportunities to capitalize on you. And Andrade, you see her, and you wouldn't say she's like traditionally. I think she's like a blue belt jiu-jitsu, right? Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say like she's. You wouldn't look at her and go, yeah, that's what the kids in class should be watching. That's textbook jiu-jitsu. She's able to get different positions by just being hyper aggressive. Short shots, long shots, on the ground. She is very active, constantly trying to move, sometimes to her detriment. Constantly trying to get positions even when she hasn't put in her foundations to be able to pass. But she's constantly attacking. I think that bodes well for her. It gives Joanna a lot more to think about. And lastly, the champion has shown that she has been able to go 5 rounds. Andrade has, she hasn't had the opportunity yet. But I have seen that Andrade has the ability to go 3 rounds hard. We've seen her in 3-round fights, and she is able to go hard for 3 rounds. So this could be Joanna's game plan. Play defensively, kind of a little bit of a matador, baiting the person to come in, sticking and moving, getting out of the way, maybe try to outpoint her, win a couple of those rounds, and then hope that she has the gas tank to really turn it on in the 4th and the 5th. And that's how I see the champion being able to pull it out by decision. You can't go against Joanna because she's so incredible everywhere. But I'm feeling it in my gut. I think that Andrade has the stuff. She has the stuff to pull the upset here. Definitely would not be surprised if Joanna did what I just said, played a more defensive game, weathered the storm in the first 3, and hope that Andrade really slows down. I think that's the X factor. It's not that Andrade can't. It's not like this is a situation like the bantamweight champion right now, Nunes, where we have seen her fade in later rounds. And so when we're talking about her with her blitzes early on and how dominant she looks in the early rounds, that is something that fighters that go against her in the future, they can game plan for that. Well, maybe I got to be defensive. I know that this is going to come. I just need to be able to survive these first few rounds, maybe outpoint her and try to steal a couple of them because she will fade. We don't know that that's the case with Andrade. We just know that she can come out and blitz hard for 3 rounds. There's also something we said when you're just kind of trying to play that defensive game. You're playing a fighting not to lose versus a fighting to win game, which is usually not rewarded with the judges.
Yeah.
So we don't, like you said, when you were breaking down Joanna, a lot of times it looks like she's moving back. The other person's throwing the punches, and people are like, how can you win by doing that? But she's not getting hit. But you also don't want to allow your opponent to steal a round just because they appear more active than you when you're indeed like landing your shot, getting out of the way. But they seem to be aggressive, moving it in. And if all she can do is get those jabs at her, that's not going to be enough either. I think it was enough against Kovacevic. She went in there and she was like, oh my gosh, Joanna is fast. And it just seemed like she could not deal with that. For 3 rounds, she could not deal with just how fast and accurate Joanna was. In that 4th round, it was kind of like she was like, F it. And she just kind of went in there. And that was the only time she really had success, was when she went in and she kind of got dirty and was just able to be aggressive and eat shots. That's Andrade's game. Even against fighters that aren't as good of a striker as she is, she's still eating shots. So, man, now that I'm talking out loud, it's kind of like, yeah, Joanna's definitely gonna take advantage of that. But Andrade's game is definitely ripe to be picked apart. There's a lot of holes, especially when she's blitzing in. She's really susceptible to those counters. Mm-hmm. And if Joanna's just quick on her feet, doesn't really get into these dog fights in the middle, and is just willing to get a couple shots off and then play a more defensive game, she can really take advantage of this with some really mean counter shots. But Andrade's game is the game that you need to even have a shot against Joanna.
Exactly.
And she has a lot of things. She has a lot of things going for her. In many ways, I mean, I remember when Claudia went against Joanna, I picked Claudia then too. Joanna proved me wrong big time, and you got to give credit to her. The girl has improved so much each and every single time. But the thing is, Claudia was able to get Joanna into positions, so she wasn't able to capitalize on it because it just wasn't her game. And her striking was just not on the same level as Joanna, but she was still trying to like box with her, and you can't fight that speed against Joanna. You can't fight Joanna like you guys are the same at striking. You're not going to be. So the person that's going to be able to have some luck, some success, not luck, there's no luck, but some success against Joanna is going to be someone that's willing to eat some shots, go in, and just stay hyper aggressive. I know that Andrade can do that for 3 rounds. I think that's enough to, at the very least, win her 3 rounds. So it's going to be tough to finish Joanna. So maybe by decision. We're trying to bring you guys, the hot takes here at VVYK. So last fight, we got Stipe Miocic versus Junior Dos Santos. Now, when Junior Dos Santos and Stipe Miocic last fought, JDS won the fight, and ever since then, they were kind of on different trajectories. JDS then suffered a couple pretty brutal losses. Stipe has been undefeated since then. Now, Junior kind of had a comeback party against Ben Rothwell.
Yeah.
And so that was nice. JDS, he just comes off as one of the nice guys in the sport, and very easy to root for. This should be a very fun heavyweight fight, if only because it's like high skill level guys that are going to want to fight, standing. That there's just nothing that can beat that, a stand-up fight in the heavyweight division. Both of these guys possess knockout power. Both these guys are phenomenal strikers. Stipe Miocic, former Golden Glove winner. Both of them, boxing is their bread and butter. Miocic would be a more well-rounded fighter between the two of them. He's got a couple other skills. His wrestling is very solid. And JDS, and he has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but you don't really see him use that too much. He really likes to go to that boxing well. Really uses striking, and then everything else is just off of that. What are your thoughts on this fight, Matt?
I think it's going to be fire, just like last time. And I think the big key will be if and when Stipe uses his wrestling and how, because last time he was not very successful, actually. Surprisingly, I think he saw, Cain Velasquez use his wrestling against him, and he's like, sweet, I got collegiate wrestling experience too, but didn't really work out for him. But when they're striking, it's fairly even. He does have more power, and he has a reach advantage, but what's his name? JDS does like to move in and out. He looked like a kind of putting on a ballet against Rothwell last time. So I think
bit of a speed difference between Rothwell and Miocic.
Yeah. I think Stipe could probably finish him, or at least land the heavier shots and win by decision this time. I think he's tweak things from what he learned last time, and he's just been on such a good run lately, and he's really stuck to his boxing. I think he's gonna eschew the wrestling and probably just hit hard for 5 rounds, or as long as it takes to win. But it's gonna be really good and explosive, fiery, hot.
So you're thinking, and still.
One of the few guys to defend it twice.
And there's no hate. He is really good. Neither fighter is I don't think you would label either of them as counter strikers, but we've seen them both have some success as counter strikers. I think JDS could find some success as a counter striker in this fight. And we've seen Miocic land that beautiful counter shot against Verdum as he was coming in. For Miocic, everything is that it's that right hand bomb that he has. It's just a incredibly powerful shot. This entire game sort of sets it up. There's one similarity between, there's a couple similarities between the two champions on this card. They're just overall striking proficiency. They also both like head out single leg takedowns. So that is Stipe's go-to. Now, unlike in the previous fight where Andrade is actually very good at the guillotine, I'm sure JDS knows how. He's a high-level mixed martial artist. He has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. We just don't see him go into that technique a lot. It would behoove him to at least threaten it if Stipe does that. Just keep that in the back of the champion's head if he tries to take down JDS. As far as boxing is concerned, man, this is, like I said, it's so awesome. It's great. I know people say styles make matchups. I never quite got that. They're like, oh yeah, this is a really fun stylistic matchup. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, whoever imposes their will wins. And it's like, that on paper sounds so much better than it ever looks on screen. It's like, oh, this guy's a grappler and this guy's a striker. And the grappler takes him down and just holds him there for 3 rounds. Or this is a grappler and this is a striker just picks him apart. It's really fun when you have 2 high-level guys that have the same strengths, because we're going to see some fireworks. This is some high-level boxing that we're going to get to see. For both fighters, for Miocic, it's that straight right. For Dos Santos, it's that overhand right. And those are their kill shots. For Dos Santos, his left shots, his left hooks in particular, I think that's money for him. And just like in a previous fight when we were talking about Joanna, the champion here, Miocic, very few weaknesses. Maybe one of the few weaknesses he does have. He's susceptible to that left hook counter. And Dos Santos is really good at throwing that kind of feint, baiting his opponents to go, and as he's covering his tracks, placing those check hooks. A very Diaz-esque. Where they throw that check hook as they're stepping out. That could be a very effective technique against Stipe. I think for JDS, it's going to be a matter of not getting rattled early on when they're filling each other out. He needs to make his presence felt, but not to get too aggressive. He needs to be confident that his striking is that good and be able to go toe-to-toe with the champion. And like I said, I think it's going to be key that if Stipe goes for that single leg, he's got to be able to threaten that guillotine. And just make the champion have to think twice about that, because we've seen Stipe once he gets on top, excellent control, great grounded pound. Yeah, I love JDS. Like I said, such a nice guy. It seems like just a likable guy, and his boxing really is good. And when you have two guys that are high level strikers with knockout power, anything can happen. So even if JDS wasn't quite on the level that he is at boxing, he would still have a chance just because hand speed and his ability to just knock people out. If he's lazy and he comes out flat-footed, we've seen JDS do sometimes, and really plant and try to just... When he plants and throws that overhand, he really puts a lot into it. And it's not his most accurate shot. That's why I really like those left hooks a little bit more. He's a lot more accurate when he's a counter striker, even though he likes to push the action and be more aggressive. So I think it's key that he doesn't get too excited early on. He's got to just stay calm and allow the champion to come to him. I think that's where JDS, that's where his game plan needs to be, and really threaten that guillotine if Miocic threatens the single leg. That's what JDS has to do to be able to win this fight. But Stipe has improved each and every single one of his fights. He's so much better now than he was in that JDS fight the first time. And I think JDS has only taken more damage. JDS hasn't exactly evolved this game. He came in, he got that quick knockout over Cain Velasquez. Even in his title defense, it was against Mir, but it was still heavily dependent on his superior striking. So I think that Stipe was better in their last fight. I think Stipe today won't be as good as that Stipe. JDS today won't be as good as that JDS, but I think Stipe today is much better than the Stipe from their last fight. I think he's learned a lot, and he's just a more well-rounded fighter. So there's different places this fight can go where he'll have the advantage. And I don't even know if you could say JDS has the advantage on his feet. There's a very good argument to make that Stipe is going to be able to beat him on the feet as well at boxing, which is JDS's that's his best skill. So if you're saying that your best skill can be matched or even bested by the champion, and then basically everything else in the fight is going to be favored towards the champion, I'm just going to have to give this one to Stipe.
Yeah.
So there you go. I agreed with you on that. How about that?
Sweet.
That means that JDS is winning that fight for sure.
Exactly. Well, he can counter-strike, but I think Stipe is his ability to stalk guys down in the cage, and it's like something about it. He has something that those few champions have. He knows how to pick his shots, and he doesn't panic under pressure. He can stand in the pocket, and when things are flying around, he can just very carefully pick a shot, and he can do it while walking somebody down too. So even though I think JDS will, like last time he had some success counter-striking, I don't think he's going to have that. I think there's going to be much narrower windows that Stipe is going to leave when he's trying to back him up. And that's where I think cage control might come into it too, because it's going to be weird depending on who's the aggressor. I really see Stipe being the slightly more aggressive one, but I think it's going to work in his favor.
I think so too. I just see Miocic, he's a machine. I really do believe. Alexa, stop. What did I say? All of a sudden I started playing a playlist. What is she doing? This is Skynet. Skynet's taking over, man. That's how it starts. They just start playing music when you don't want them to, and then they kill you. That's like the 2-part plan. But
question mark profit.
But yeah, talking about the champion, his footwork has improved, his techniques have improved, his striking is so much sharper. He's improved. Even though he was a former Golden Glove winner, he's actually improved his striking. I think as he keeps pressuring JDS, even though, like I said, I think JDS's best chances here are being a little bit more patient and looking for those check hooks and those especially that left hook, being able to get Miocic when he's coming in. I think that's JDS's best shot at maybe getting a couple shots that rock the champion and then really setting up his overhand when Miocic is a little hurt or wobbly. But man, as the fight goes on, I don't see Miocic breaking down. I think he's going to still be the tactician, the machine, keep going forward. And JDS, he definitely does get slower in the later rounds. So I see his defense getting a little bit more sloppy. And we haven't even gotten to, like, you were talking about in the clinch and how great Miocic is there. And JDS, he gambles a lot, hands down low off the break. I mean, these are all things that the champion can capitalize on. It's a lot like the last fight that we just broke down, where both Andrade and JDS, they have some tendencies to make mistakes. I think the difference being Andrade, it's not so much a mistake, but it's like she's giving up something in order to achieve what she wants to do. And some of it's just like she has to, being the smaller fighter, get inside. I think for JDS, it's kind of just sloppy technique. And he really depends on head movement, kind of like Conor in that way, where he kind of depends on the head movement and footwork to get out of shots instead of just straight up hands up. But Miocic is so quick and his techniques are so sharp that, you know, your hands out, your hands down when you're breaking off the clinch, and Stipe can knock you out. JDS go night. So, what did you think this was? You think this is going to go to decision with two high level strikers?
I doubt it. They know each other pretty well, and can't remember the last time Stipe went to decision besides against JDS, actually. Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. One of the things about JDS is this impressive chin. I mean, we had to suffer through those Kane rematches where he just got walloped.
Oh, my God.
But just, like, refused to go down. And I think everyone was just, like, the fans were throwing in the white towel for him. They're like, you're just taking so much punishment. But, he, you know, credit to him. Tough guy, tough chin, a lot of heart. There's many reasons to root for Junior Dos Santos. But then I think it caught up to him. We saw against Alistair Overeem, put him to sleep. So Miocic is just so much better than he was last time. And I think JDS is slightly worse. And last fight was awfully close. So you got to go Miocic here.
Yeah.
I think this might go to decision though. You got two high level guys. Decision on a heavyweight fight. I think it could, especially if you see what happens a lot of times when you have two guys with like similar strengths. They respect it, and you kind of see guys that are a little bit more tentative, and then by the time they really start pouring it on, they kind of have a feel for each other's timing, so you can't land that one shot. If it is finished, I mean, I think it goes both ways. It's not like there's one way that favors JDS. I think JDS would. I'd have a hard time seeing him win this decision, so he probably would have to finish Miocic. But I see if the fight's finished, it's Miocic's victory. I see if the fight goes to decision, I still think it's Miocic's victory.
I'm calling Miocic third round TKO.
Now we know it's definitely going to be JDS third round. Like I called the TKO in the third round. Your Magic 8 Ball was a little hazy there. Didn't tell you. Didn't give you a name.
It's getting
just
old.
told you.
Damn
You have any final thoughts on the card? Anything else?
No, it should be a lot of fun, and I have to remind everybody not to forget about Mother's Day, because otherwise you'll be in big trouble, Mr. or Mrs.
Yeah, that's right. Remember Mother's Day. And also, remember to tune in for this excellent fight card on Saturday, May the 13th, live in Dallas, Texas. Just a bunch of really great matchups on that card. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks again, Matt, for doing this with me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
To all you listeners out there, do you think? You agree with what we said? Please write to us. Tweet at us at Bros, or just leave a message in the comments section below. Love to hear from you guys. And if you like this, please give us a thumbs up. And for the latest and greatest in all things BBYK, subscribe. And until next time, we are the Bros, you know.
Also, never trust your high school wrestling coach who tells you, "Oh, you have to put your head on the inside for the single leg." Bullshit.